Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a technique called right hand leading, which you can use for all kinds of piano improvisation styles. You can use it for blues or for jazz, various others. But it's really useful if you're interested in pop piano and piano ballads and any kind of popular contemporary piano music. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you know what I'm talking about when I talk about chord progressions and comping. Okay? If you're not familiar with the basic concepts there, and they're not complicated, go back in my timeline and check out some of my earlier videos. I'll maybe include some links to some of the most important ones just to get you started. But for now, I'm going to assume that if I talk about a comp, in other words, improvising an accompaniment based on a chord progression, that you're familiar with the basic ideas. Okay, so right hand leading. Let's imagine that you have heard a song on the radio that you really like, and it's a medium to slow tempo piano ballad. So you've done the natural thing, you've gone online, you've found the lyrics and you've found the chords. And let's say that the first 8 bars of the chord progression look a bit like this. C, G, F, C, F, C, G, which will probably take us back to C. Okay, a very common kind of 8-bar loop, really typical of the kind of chord progression you get in a lot of piano ballads. Now, I was playing those chords there in a very basic comping style. Block chord in the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, beat out in the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. If this was actually for a performance, or if you gave the song to any kind of competent pop pianist, obviously they'd elaborate on it, and they'd probably do something a bit like this. Repeating, yeah. So it's been elaborated on, it's been built on. There are interesting things in there. We've got stuff like the country third, we've got arpeggios, all of which I've talked about in the past. The right hand leading is quite a subtle effect, but it's absolutely key to what I was doing there. Okay, think back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 for each bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now watch what I'm actually doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's quite hard to count and do it at the same time. But what's actually happening is that I'm changing the chord in the right slightly ahead of the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not doing it every single time. Let me, rather than try and count and do it at the same time, let me play a comp again and see if you can see that I'm changing the chord in the right, just kind of half a beat, maybe even less, ahead of the left. Okay, so sometimes that right hand is landing just half a beat or a quarter of a beat even ahead of the left hand. Doesn't happen in every bar. So it happens there, not there, not there, but there, not there, but there. Okay? It's one of those techniques that it's difficult to teach. You have to kind of experiment, and you should find that if you comp enough, it kind of comes naturally after a while. The thing to do is to be aware of it, because when you've got a chord sequence in front of you, it's very easy to sit there counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and change dead on the sequence. You might say to yourself, but hold on, there's a problem there, because that means there'll be certain points in the song where I'm playing, say, a C chord in my left, but I've moved on to G in the right. Isn't that a horrible discord? Yes, in principle it is, but the fact is that it's for a relatively small amount of time, and it's when this left hand chord is really dying away. Okay, so the dis chord is actually quite slight. It's still there to an extent, but only to the extent that it kind of adds interest. Yeah. Giving your songs a bit of right hand leading like that has a couple of big advantages. First of all, you get that very subtle harmonic interest, okay? But also it gives the whole song a sense of moving forward, a sense of progress and a sense of flowing, okay? So if we played that comp, but very, very straight, kind of plods a little bit, okay, and this is one of the big dangers of pop piano comping. Unless you get the feel and the flow right, it can sound really ploddy if you're just playing a relatively simple chord sequence. But if we do it with the right hand leading, not in every bar, but every now and then, so the bars are kind of, you know, the chords are kind of overlapping each other, and it gives it much more of a sense of progress. Okay, so one thing that's actually worth saying is that if you, you know, a lot of people I know who watch my videos get their chords off the internet, which is great. You just need to be careful of the quality of them sometimes, because they're not always accurate. You know, if they're just sort of chords that other enthusiasts have put up. If you buy the sheet music of pop songs, you'll probably already know this, but the piano accompaniment, say if you bought, I don't know, you know, the piano music for Elton John's Candle in the Wind, you'll find that the piano accompaniment is relatively heavily simplified compared to what Elton John actually plays. And one of the first things that's sacrificed in commercial simplifications of pop songs is right hand leading. Okay, because on the page it looks quite scary, because you get a note right at the end of the bar, often a chord quite chunky, tied on to lots of other notes at the start of the next bar, and it looks really difficult and challenging. And of course what sheet music publishers are trying to do is to appeal to people who don't have a massive ability on the piano but are reasonably competent, and they want them to go into the shop and open the sheet music and say to themselves, yeah, I reckon I can probably play that. And because right hand leading looks relatively complicated, even though it isn't, it tends to get missed out of sheet music, okay? Which is why, you know, you might not even be aware that it kind of exists. So the thing to do to practice it is just do what you normally do to practice your comps. If you're into this kind of pop piano, take a chord sequence like the one I've just shown you, and just think about building a little bit of that leading in. At first you might find it a little bit tricky, especially if you try and think about it consciously. But if you kind of, to get into pop psychology, if you kind of right brain it and just go with the flow, you should find it comes quite naturally. Okay, let me just demonstrate again on that chord sequence a couple of times. So every one of those bars had a right hand leading, yeah? That one didn't, that one did, that one did. I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, stick them in the comment thread. I've been a bit slack about getting back to people on questions recently, but I'm sorry about that because I've been so busy. But honestly, if you put a question, I will come back to you. It might just take a day or two.